Good evening, Chelsea fans, and welcome back to episode 5 of Chelsea Waves. So far, so very good in this pivotal week for the Blues, with the Burnley and Barcelona tests now both successfully navigated and in style. Today, we'll be digging into the key talking points from both games and casting our attention to the big one on Sunday at home to Arsenal at the top of the league. We'll be joined by Aaron Nutman, Vice President of Guy Carpenter and a massive Gooner for the outside perspective ahead of this crunch London derby. We'll also be analysing Chelsea's title prospects ahead of this and assessing whether it is legit. So, without further ado, let's jump into it.
Chelsea 3, Barcelona nil. An emphatic win against the fiercest of European rivals. Emblematic of Chelsea back in the big time. One step beyond booming, the bridge bouncing. Finally, some signs of an Enzo Maresca loving on top. Basking in adulation at full time. Take me back.
It did feel like Maresca's sort of coming out party and announcing himself on the European stage, and more broadly for Chelsea, re-announcing us as sort of a credible competitor at the summit of European football, in my perspective. It was such a fun watch, largely aided in part to Barcelona's high line and their overall style, but there were moments of flair and individual skill that got us off our seat. But what really stuck out to me was just the sheer intensity and physicality of Chelsea, and it was such a mismatch for Barcelona. And I think we've seen this with Arsenal against Real Madrid last year as well, and even Liverpool recently against Real Madrid. There's such a physical mismatch between Premier League clubs and La Liga clubs, and that was best epitomised by the likes of Cucurella in particular, who was up and down, absolutely everywhere, left, right, inverting. Caicedo, some of those tackles were just absolutely ridiculous, and it's really positive and encouraging to see him finally get his flowers in a different context. Premier League fans, I think, have largely accepted that he's incredible, but I've seen fans across the continent now accepting that as well. And a special shout out, I think, as well to James and Gusto in that sort of rotational role between right back and centre mid as well. Just really taking the game to Barcelona, and it was that physicality that really stuck out to me.
I'd say we've complained of late kind of frequently over Maresca lineups being nonsensical, illogical. When we saw that decision to opt against our traditional number nines and go for Neto in the nine and the pacey attack, I have to say it kind of really made sense. And boy, did it pay off. I thought Neto was absolutely scintillating, leaving La Masia centre back on his Kabasi. To quote the Stamford Bridge faithful, Esteval, I like it. His stocks were rising during the international break. He has now been thrust into the limelight. We saw Yamal comparisons, potentially premature, but why not? Let's go with it. And the latter, let's be real here, was quite frankly locked up by Cucurella. Another stellar, or rather Estrella, showing.
I do just want to call out Esteval. I mean, everyone's talking about him. It's nothing no one's aware of at this point. But during that international break, he was the protagonist very much of that Brazil team in that game at the Emirates. I think he scored a goal in their friendly over in France and Lille as well. But this felt like the moment he really announced himself in Europe and in Champions League, which is what really feels like his destiny and his natural calling for us. So I think it's 3 goals in a row in 3 starts in the Champions League at his raw age of 18 is just absolutely scintillating. And there are features about him that you struggle to put your finger on, to be honest. It is like the intangibles. We know he's got the skill, the guile, the attitude, but it's a really cringe term, but like the aura that he has. He looks so adept at stepping up to the occasion and announcing himself and taking himself to new heights every time we play. I really do think the sky is the limit for this kid. He just oozes class. And I was listening to Tim Vickery, who's obviously a South American football specialist, and he said this was, where Vinicius Junior was not that long ago and Neymar was. But the key difference with him is just his attitude, his demeanor, his approach. He seems to be happy and just focused on self-improvement. He's not, about the life of being the most rich and famous man in the world. He's come to try his apply his trade in the Premier League, which neither of them ever have done. He's just an absolute superstar, and I really think the sky is the limit for him.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned the stat, 3 goals in 3 Champions League starts. He's following in the footsteps of solely Erling Haaland and Kylian Mbappe. It's a very esteemed company. And you mentioned kind of humility there. Permanently pre and post games, you're seeing videos emerging of him, despite the heroics on the pitch and at the stadium, frequently turning up to church and joining in gospel singing. So
I haven't seen those videos, but I'd love to.
long may that continue. We mentioned going into this game that you're fairly kind of dismissive of Barcelona. I, at the time, kind of questioned was that a little bit naive? The Liga champions last year, minutes away from a Champions League final. I think I saw them against Newcastle. Pedri running the show, and I do want to kind of highlight the lack of Pedri as a potential caveat. But Moises and Enzo, I have to say, absolutely ran the game. The other obvious tax here was Ronald Araujo. Absolute insanity. That second yellow card, you could see it coming from a mile away.
I think for Barcelona at full strength, if you've got Pedri, you've got Gavi, which is a rarity these days. You have Rashford on the left, Lamau on the right, Rafinha rotating in those forward positions as well as Lewandowski. We know it's not the best version of him, but that is a good team. But this approach that Hansi Flick has adopted relies on all those players being there and in sort of full fitness, which they're obviously not at the moment. We saw Rafinha on the bench. I think it was his first game back. Pedri didn't make the squad on this occasion. But I do want to temper the excitement slightly from a Chelsea perspective of this game because that high line is just utterly ridiculous, and it was plain to see probably from minute 3. I think we got our first disallowed of like 3 or 4 on the night, and even after the red card, they didn't make any tweaks tactically to adapt to how the game is playing out. I can't believe it, to be honest, just how vulnerable they are and how tactically naive Hansi Flick sets them up for a manager that's, been at the summit of European football, won the Champions League, cooked Barcelona 8-2, I think it was back in that game and during COVID. The naivety to just persist with this approach, having players like Araujo and Pau Cubarsí hanging practically on the halfway line against the likes of Garnacho, Esteban, and Neto, just seems mad to me. And it was such, I give Enzo Maresca his flowers for reading that situation and playing Neto up front to break that high line. But it was obvious to see.
I think Juan on the pod last week mentioned the kind of lack of pragmatism and the stubbornness from Hansi Flick. It feels like a system that potentially even more so than Maresca's relies on every element being precisely fine-tuned and clicked into gear, whether it be the players available, the timing, the fitness level of each and every player. But as you said, players hung out to dry. Paul Kabasi on multiple occasions. Let's cast our minds back to Turf Moor, which, again, last week you mentioned potentially the more important game. 3 points there at the Saturday early kickoff. I saw a stat that we now have 8 wins out of 8 in our last early kickoff. It really goes to show how football cliches kind of etch into the psyche.
We've had tremendous fear, I think, for the last two 12:30 Saturday kickoffs that we've had that coincidentally were both after an international break. Obviously, the game that we've spoken about at length versus Nottingham Forest, Ange Postecoglou's last game in the dugout for them, and now Burnley as well, which we voiced our concerns over, but both have gone really well for us with convincing wins in both situations. Again, our anxiety was heightened when we saw the team and the lineup with multiple players obviously rotated and rested for this. We saw Caicedo and Estevao on the bench, Garnacho, James being hooked off after 45 minutes. And at the time, I wasn't really happy because I felt like this was the most important game of this sort of really decisive week that we had ahead of us with Burnley and then Barcelona and Arsenal to follow. But I think it was a gamble. It's now with the benefit of hindsight, paid off for Maresca, and I'm happy to applaud him for that. We saw players like Andre Santos in particular, getting man of the match and really stepping up to the occasion, winning possession multiple times, numerous decisive forward passes. Even Jamie Gittins had a couple of key moments as well, particularly with that cross for Pedro Neto for the opener. And Mark Guiu, it was really positive to see him come on and get an assist for that goal from Enzo Fernandez. So yeah, really, really positive all round. Wasn't the prettiest of games, but 3 points was ultimately what we needed, and Maresca delivered for us.
You say convincing. I'm going to challenge that again, not quite to the same extent as Forest away. But again, it was a sleepy, sort of shaky start, first 20, 25, 30 even, before we kind of started to get a grip on the game. And as you say, Santos started to run it. Potentially that Caicedo gamble definitely paid up, and we saw his freshness, as we said, against Barcelona. One other negative for me, again, that strike partnership, João Pedro and Delap, both fairly blunt, toothless against Wolves. Follow that up with substandard showings against Burnley. Again, my brother and I were kind of joking about sort of League One Liam. Again, I'm hoping this is rust coming back into fitness, but there were some sort of worrying touches and particularly decision making. I think there was a moment in the game where a simple square ball to Enzo Fernandez would have had Chelsea 1-0 up, and he didn't even see it, didn't even attempt it. So another question mark for me, and ultimately it cost them their place in the lineup against Barca, and I would wager for that weekend game against Arsenal as well.
I think with Delap, he didn't get a goal early on in his Premier League career for Chelsea, and he got that horrible hamstring tear against Fulham, and he's come back and he's obviously looked very rusty, and we've seen those cobwebs in those games against Wolves and Burnley. But I think in the latter fixture, he really did grow into it, probably midway through that first half. And early into the second half, we saw that physicality that he can provide and the robustness up front that I don't think anyone else in the squad is currently capable of providing. And to speak sort of non-chronologically, we saw that come to the fore against Barcelona, particularly when their terrible defenders, Pau Kubasi, obviously couldn't handle that physicality. He came on, he got his first goal this season, which was really positive for us. So I think I don't want to play him down too much. I think he's getting back to fitness. He's showing the physicality and that robustness up front that we absolutely need. So I definitely want to rally behind him. Joao Pedro, I think we sort of left him hanging for the early part of this season. We saw Cole Palmer break down in the second game against West Ham. Delap tore his hamstring, I think, in the third fixture, and he was relied on basically to get us through that first phase of the season, which he has done, albeit with immense struggle at times. But it's taken a toll on him physically, I think, and we just need to let him bed himself back in. He's got a couple of goals recently against Tottenham and Wolves, but we want to see him probably in that 10 position, being a bit more creative, connecting play, and being a bit more decisive in possession, I think. So I think it's generally positive signs with the two of them, and it gives us immense strength and depth, to be honest.
I don't think we expect Liam to be challenging a starting berth at the weekend. João Pedro, however, with the performance of Neto, potentially could find himself on the bench again, but we will see. In terms of kind of other players knocking on the door, as you said, Andre Santos, man of the match, but he was phenomenal, particularly against that Arsenal midfield of Zubimendi, Rice, and Eze. I question whether there's potentially a place for him, particularly with Malo Gusto struggling with injury.
We shall see. Before we wrap up on this section, I do just want to give a particular shout out to the sort of consistent mainstays in our team currently. It would be Caicedo, he would do the same job, but three players in particular. Cucurella, ever present, delivering 9 out of 10 performances every time he plays, and it's absolutely remarkable. And I would say the same at present of Pedro Neto. He's really upped his numbers so far this year, and he gets a lot of hate online, which I think is just absolutely bemusing. He's delivering every time he plays, almost for us at the moment, and I couldn't be happier with him. And Enzo Fernandez, who continues to be a massive enigma for me. I don't see him dominating games and cutting the opposition team open all the time, but he's always there. Every time we're breaking and there's an opportunity to cut the ball across, he's always there. And I simply have to applaud him at this point and really hope he can just build on that and become this £105 million midfielder that we always wanted him to be.
Absolutely. I think he's listened to our podcast a few weeks back and he's responded, and long may that continue.
So, Chelsea currently, as it stands at the end of November, 6 points off the top of the Premier League. The chance to reduce that gap to 3 points if we can get a win against Arsenal. I think the whole league is looking at us currently as potential contenders and potentially the only opportunity to stop Arsenal from winning a Premier League. How are you feeling, George, in terms of our prospects?
I think we absolutely should be targeting a title charge. It's well documented the billions we've spent. I feel like you add a 0.5 every report, every article you reach. But recently, we've shown we're capable. We've had emphatic wins against La Liga champions Barcelona just this week. And that 3-0 victory over PSG, record-breaking PSG side, 5-0 winners in the Champions League, conquered every top English side on their way. Very much shows that we've got it within us to perform at the top level. So we've seen we're capable, and ultimately, I believe the bipolar runs of form under Enzo Maresca can all be traced back to those comments about this time last year that we were not title contenders. We were sat just 2 points behind eventual winners Liverpool off the back of a 5-game winning streak. And in the wake of those comments, we proceed to draw 0-0 at home to Everton, lose at home to Fulham with a sickening late spin, lose away to relegated Ipswich. I very much believe his comments created a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. You give the modern player an inch and they take a mile. As I said, 5-game winning streak was juxtaposed with 5 games without a win. And I think this Chelsea side, throughout the whole squad, you look at players who are kind of indifferent, inconsistent. I believe a lot of that is down to mentality. I think recently you saw phenomenal performances from Wesley Fofana and Malo Gusto, 2 players that we've criticised, and yet against Barcelona you see top levels of performances. I almost liken the 2 of those to David Luiz. I think they can be sloppy, lapse, as I say, given an inch, they'll take a mile. But for those big games, they've shown they can get up to it. So I think it's purely a case of us riding this current wave and fully instilling that belief in our side that the sky is the limit. We're going to speak shortly about Arsenal, the elephant in the room, clear favourites across all bookies, not only for the Premier League, but potentially a European double. But this is an Arsenal side that have been perennial bridesmaids. They have consistently fallen short, yes, to a top City side, but Liverpool kind of came from nowhere last year. And I would wager a couple of those City wins were clear evidence of bottle. How do you see it?
I accept all that, but ultimately, in my mind, I think the objective at the start of this season, and currently remains the case for me, is a top 3 finish. I wanted to see basically from our 4th place finish last year an improvement domestically, to push on definitely for, at the very least, a domestic trophy. And why not reach for the stars and push for our 3rd Champions League trophy? I don't think there's anyone that good out there. It's a tricky one in the Premier League because I think there's this almost a juxtaposition between the overall quality of the Premier League being so competitive that there's genuinely not an easy game when you go to Bournemouth, Brentford, Villa, whoever that might be, juxtaposed against this decline of the sort of top 6 or maybe the top 8 that we're seeing currently with the likes of Newcastle, City, Liverpool, and Spurs, in particular with their current demise, which we're seeing unfold. Given where we are currently on the 27th of November, I would say there's a clear opportunity for us to establish ourselves at the very least in the top 2. I'll obviously reassess the situation again after Sunday against Arsenal, because if we can find a way to drum up 3 points off the back of that game. I think we are firmly in contention, but my view is shaped largely by the superior forces I see of Arsenal, unfortunately, who've spent 6 years gelling consistently with managers and squads, and this really sort of pragmatic squad building that we see there, and this commitment to a very specific philosophy at that club. We know that title winning teams, as Jose Mourinho always said, are built on defence. And I don't think we currently have that. We're almost built on Moises Caicedo and a pretty good attack, which I don't think has ever been the case. We saw Brendan Rodgers under Liverpool try and win the league with Sturridge, Suarez, and Sterling, and a terrible defence, and it didn't work. And I don't. In order to do it, we're going to have to buck a major trend there. Given we've got the likes of Wesley Fofana, Trevor, Chalobah, Tosin as our three centre backs. Largely, it's a real tall order. But I'm not closing the door to this possibility, and I'd love nothing more. But I think we need to win this game on Sunday, or I think it is curtains on a title charge.
I have to say it's a massive bugbear for me, this kind of consistent talk of projects in football. I would wager it's self-preservation on behalf of the managers for the most part. Progression in life, in football, is not linear. I'm very much a believer you've got to strike while the iron's hot. You're looking now at a Liverpool side in complete and utter disarray. You would expect, with the financial outlay there, that the likes of Isak, the likes of Wirtz eventually get it right. City under Pep a little bit indifferent, but not convincing. So I see Arsenal, as I say, as clear favourites, but they are the sole credible competition for Chelsea this year. And why not? Why not ride the wave, beat Arsenal this weekend? Likes of Esteval, sky's the limit. Cole Palmer coming back into the team. We've shown this form of late without our undisputed best player of the last 2 years, Cole Palmer. So let's shoot for the stars, and worst comes to worst, land on the moon, avoid kind of a Champions League scrap. The other kind of elephant in the room consistently is the lure of Real Madrid. I know other sides in Europe potentially don't have that financial clout to compete with the Premier League, but Real Madrid, potentially Barca, mentioned in the context of Esteval. So a little bit of kind of disarray there with draws against Elche and Rayo Vallecano. Talk of a discontent squad with Xabi Alonso, but ultimately a need to sign midfielders. You can full well imagine that Moises Caicedo and now potentially Enzo Fernandez are at the top of that list. So we can't continually sort of sign young players in the view that our crop, our harvest will be really fruitful in 3, 4, 5 years' time. Football does not work like that. There can be injuries, there can be sales. Now the time is ripe. Let's kick on. Let's give it a really good go and see where that takes us. Time now for the opposition view. Arsenal at home, the big one, 4:30 p.m. this Sunday. Welcome, friend of the pod, Aaron Joel Nutman.
Thanks, chaps, for having me on. Big fan of the pod. What you guys have been doing recently is it's been great stuff, so keep it up.
Cheers, mate. Let's get into it. So Arsenal, 6 points clear headed into Sunday. The chance to extend that lead to 9 on Chelsea and potentially 7 on City teams below. What's kind of the current feeling around the club? From the outside, it feels like it's Arsenal's year. I'm getting Liverpool 1920 vibes. Long in the hunt, long chasing, and finally potentially getting over the line.
It's a good feeling currently at the club. A lot of fans are really, really getting behind Arteta this year, and I mean the proof is in the pudding. We're 6 points clear, top of the group of the Champions League. All the players seem to be getting behind Mikel Arteta right now. It does feel like it's our year, but it's only November, and you never know who's going to win the title. You can't win the league in November, but you can certainly lose it.
I'd love to know what the sort of inside perspective is regarding the whole defensive first, set piece first approach that you've currently got, because it's been obviously a topic of ridicule, maybe from the outside, albeit you're having tremendous success with it. But I think everyone would concede happily that it is working to a very large extent at the moment. But Is it an appealing style of football to be there in the stadium and to witness it in person?
It's a strange one. I will say this, the amount of set pieces we get, the more it boils the piss of other fans, I think the better we feel about it. I think we've scored something crazy like 35% of our goals have been from set pieces this year. So whenever we get a corner, I think all of our fans now prefer to get a corner than a shot on target these days. So whilst it is very much set piece ole ole, we're feeling good about it. In order to win titles, you really need a strong defense. So very happy with our defensive record so far, and even better that our defenders are adding with goals as well.
I can't really ridicule it, to be honest. I mean, for years, you guys were the punching bag of the league. How many times did you go to Stoke, for example, and just get absolutely bullied in a winter game under Wenger? I remember anecdotally just talking to Glenn, my brother, about Arsenal. Every time you'd get a set piece, I would say categorically, this is going to amount to nothing, and it always didn't. But now it's gone full circle, and it's quite the opposite. It is probably the single most feared tactic in football. I even saw Joshua Kimmich talking about it quite bitterly today, saying it wasn't a proper football match, and PSG was much more of a pleasure to play against than Arsenal. But that feels like sour grapes, and I feel like that defines the sentiment of most football fans these days as it relates to Arsenal.
No, I agree. I think it's quite ironic that Arsenal fans for years would ridicule Chelsea fans for playing a similar style of play, especially under that second tenure for Jose Mourinho. And I think also in 2005 when you conceded something like 15 goals. So it's nice to finally be on the other side where we're not conceding any goals. Opposition players and fans seem to hate us and the way that we play. These are all things that are just leading to potentially a very, very good season.
I think as frustrating as it is seeing Arsenal kind of trot up the pitch, almost like a rugby team at times. It's as if they're kind of, approaching kind of the opposition try line for a 5 meter throw in. It potentially is a little bit too reductive. I mean, we saw recently the handbrake off against Spurs, a beautiful hat trick from Eze. I've seen discourse that sides are kind of sitting in a low block. Chelsea at the weekend, I think we're probably too proud to do that. Potentially, we will see more of that attacking flair from Arsenal at the weekend. Moving now on to Chelsea. We would love to kind of get the opposition view on the circus that is Chelsea FC in 2025. How do you see us as a club?
Well, I don't see you as a circus anymore, purely based off the fact that I think the whole league, except for Arsenal right now, is basically a circus. I think Chelsea, given how much you've spent over the last 3 years, eventually you were going to get it, so to speak, right. I think this year, your running or the games that you've played haven't been particularly hard. However, you've seemed to have beaten teams pretty comfortably. You're doing quite well in Europe. I don't think that you're the Chelsea of old yet, but I do like the squad, despite it being about 35 players big. But you look good.
Title challenges or a way off still?
It's a tough one. It's a tough one. I think when you're second in the league at Christmas, which I think Chelsea very well could be, you have to consider yourself title challengers. However, it's all about how you finish, not about how you start. So I think come May, will Chelsea still be second? In my head, I don't think they will be. However, I think comfortably Chelsea will be a top 4 team.
I think the difference between us is obviously that we are every season to a large extent quite an unknown quantity. There's always an influx of new players coming into the league, as you've seen with the likes of Andre Santos, Esteval, Jamie Gittins, for example. Whereas this Arsenal team has been very much sort of marinating under Arteta for a good sort of 5-6 years now, and I think that leap of faith that you've taken in the manager and the strategic approach you've had to squad building and a specific sort of philosophy that you're adhering to right now around reinventing Arsenal from this sort of silky, forward-thinking team to this strong, regimented side that you currently are. I think it's paying dividends, and it's two opposite philosophies I really see for Arsenal. Like, I think you are a shoo-in for the league as it stands. I'm not going to rule out Chelsea, and I'd love nothing more than us to push you all the way and maybe pip you to the league. But I think if you're a betting man, you would only look at Arsenal currently.
Talk of kind of loving nothing more. How deep is that Arsenal-Chelsea rivalry for you?
It's very deep and it's very, very personal, mainly because I've known Ryan for many, many years. But also purely the fact that growing up, Arsenal, and it was very much roles reversed, and Chelsea were the very, very successful team throughout my teenage years. So, and we were considered the circus.
How does it compare to Spurs? I know it's not quite the same geographically speaking, although you are technically a Woolwich club and your genesis was in South London, not North, as we all know. But there is that geographical rivalry that currently exists. I'd love to know how that stacks up. But also against a club like United, who you had that historic sort of competitive rivalry with in the Premier League, that's been reinvented to a large extent by the fact they're terrible, basically. But how does it compare to those two, for example?
I 100% hate Chelsea much more than I hate Spurs,
I
and
knew
that
it.
is purely down to the fact that Chelsea have been successful. Spurs have never won anything of significance in my lifetime anyway. And a large bulk of my friends have been Chelsea fans, so it was not fun growing up next to them when Chelsea had all the success. United's a strange one because they sort of hit their down period as we were growing up. We missed the real golden Fergie years.
Mm.
But it is a historic rivalry with Arsenal fans and United fans. I think now it's a bit of a joke because United are an absolute disgrace at the moment. However, um, you love to go up to Old Trafford or then come back to the Emirates and beat them.
Maybe it's a personal experience for you, but I get the sense that most Arsenal fans hate Chelsea more than Tottenham. I feel like the default opinion is obviously yes, North London rivalry, etc. But I do get the strong feeling that the games between Chelsea and Arsenal mean more than the North London derby. I feel like people aren't ready to admit it yet, but it feels very much the case for me. I'm not sure about Spurs Chelsea, because their dream and the pinnacle in their eyes is to beat Arsenal, and it never happens. But um, do you think that chimes with your view?
I think so. I think Chelsea, you look forward to those games at the Bridge, and similarly, us hosting Chelsea. Whereas, don't get me wrong, a North London derby is absolutely incredible, but beating Spurs is in our DNA. Beating Chelsea, growing up, personally speaking, was not. So now that we've had the upper hand for the last 4 or 5 years, it's been an absolutely glorious feeling, especially our record at Stamford Bridge, which has been pretty sensational in the last 5, 6 years.
We haven't beaten you since August 2021. I was listening to you on the way here. It was obviously that game where Reece James and Lukaku scored, and that feels like a different universe now. That was post-COVID. So I'm really hoping we can get one over you at some point, hopefully starting this Sunday.
It's interesting as you say that kind of role reversal. For me, sort of growing up, conditioned by kind of Didier Drogba, having one over Arsenal, obviously there's a kind of a Thierry Henry free kick goal prematurely taken, a couple of ties with that handover from Invincibles into Jose's Chelsea, but it was very much the rival with Man United in the Premier League, and I'd say Liverpool in the Champions League that kind of crystallised my focus. So I would probably say those two, along with Spurs, have kind of very much been ahead of Arsenal for me in the pecking order of disdain. I have to say, recently, I think a combination of Arteta, the smugness, dictator we've called him, but also just this crop of Arsenal fans coming out of the woodwork. I would wager they are the only side whereby there could be a big Arsenal game on the box, call it a Champions League game midweek, and you will see Arsenal shirts out and about in the gym, out at restaurants, individuals donning the drip, but not watching the game.
This is the problem with being the biggest club in London, is that we have the biggest following.
South London.
A whole of London. I do agree that in recent years, with our squad getting stronger, there have definitely been more fans coming out of the woodwork. I will say though that that is the same for absolutely every club. You will not believe the amount of Chelsea fans that suddenly popped up in the like early teens, late noughties. Um, but it's great. It's great. We welcome them, and as long as Arsenal is still a strong team and we still competing at the highest level, hopefully the fan base will grow even more.
It's always the Sunday 4:30, I feel like, at the Bridge as well, and it gives me tremendous anxiety. It's the worst kickoff slot ever. With the Monday Blues and the Arsenal Blues fused in one, it gives me a terrible sense of dread. But how do you see this one going on Sunday?
I definitely think that it is going to be, there's only going to be one goal in it. I think defensively, as you said, it will be Hincapié, I think, starting in place of Gabriel. I think I think we're just going to continue as we are. I think it's going to be a very tight game decided by a set piece, which will probably rile up a lot of Chelsea fans, which I'm going to absolutely love. Uh, but I have gone for 1-0 Arsenal. I really can't see us losing. I know that we can have lapse of judgment. I remember last season, Pedro Neto scored a very, very tidy goal, which was against someone of play. That could potentially happen again. I know he's been on very good form recently, but I can't see anything other than an Arsenal win.
Interesting. George, where's your head at?
I'm going to put my neck on the line and say that Robert Sanchez, is going to be the elixir for Set Piece FC. His new kind of commanding presence, plucking crosses. I'm going to say he's going to neutralise that Arsenal set piece threat. I am, however, going to call a questionable Arsenal penalty to go 1-0 up, Bukayo Saka, with an iconic Esteval Cole Palmer double sub to come on and salvage a 1-1 draw for Chelsea.
And I'm going to give a very rare, optimistic take from my side. I have a feeling the wind is in our sail. I think the players are in the right moment. Someone has to beat Arsenal, and I think if anyone, it has to be us. So I'm going to go for a 2-1. I think we're actually going to go 2-0 up by about the 50th minute. I'm not going to go too prescriptive in terms of who that is. I could see Joao Pedro getting a scrappy goal. That's me going prescriptive there. And I don't think Cole Palmer's going to come on, to be honest. I think his recovery will not lend itself too well to the absolute melee that is Arsenal. But I'm going to go for 2-1. Saka will score a penalty, as George mentioned there. And hopefully the title race will be on. I don't think we'll win it, but I think it would be good for everyone to have a bit of competition there and to recreate this rivalry.
No, I think honestly, good luck to you chaps.
Love it.
Not sure how the game's going to go, but I'll see you in the pub before for
Hey, where are we meeting?
I'm sure we've seen each other before. The question is whether we'll be there post game. Catch you then, mate. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, lad.
Thanks for coming on, Nutman. It's a pleasure.
Thanks everybody for joining us once again today. Let's cross our fingers for Sunday and on behalf of the rest of the Premier League and hope that we're back here this time next week analysing another critical 3 points for Chelsea. Until then, take care.